Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you on this chilly, rainy morning. So I graduated from Williams. My husband graduated from Williams. One of my sons is here on campus. I asked him if he, I just said last night, I dropped him off at his dorm, and I said, you can come and hear me talk tomorrow if you want. And he was like, no. So he's not here. And actually, if you were in the previous panel discussion, he is a physics major, and Kate Jensen, who is one of the professors that he's working closely with, and he couldn't speak more highly of that. So we're going to talk about worry. We're going to talk about, more importantly, where things are right now with young adults and mental health. The first few slides are going to bum you out, but that's just to get your attention. And then we're going to talk very concretely about what we can and can't do as parents. As Rob was saying, as a therapist, I'm very focused on skills. When a family is in front of me, I am always thinking, what are the skills and resources that this family already has, and where are the gaps, and what do I have to teach? I imagine that there is a target in front of me, and I am trying to hit the bullseye in as few shots as possible. I don't mess around. I work quickly with families as quickly as I can. It doesn't mean that I don't have long-term relationships with some of the kids that I see. Anxiety is a good business to be in these days if you want job security. I did 92 workshops last year between the months of September and June. I'll probably do at least that many this year. I still have a private practice. I still see kids when I'm home. My office is off the back of my house. I don't feel like I could stand up here and do this if I weren't still working with families. This last few weeks has been college freshman weeks in Lynn Lyons' practice, because all of these kids that I sent off to college, they're settling in, and now kind of the bloom is off the rose, and they're sort of saying, like, now what do I do? And this happened, and I just got an email last night that one of the girls that I've known for a long time is having a tough time because her roommate locks her out of her room, and what is she accidentally cut off the tip of her finger when she was cutting something. So it's all of this sort of normal stuff of adjusting. So the thing about anxiety, not only is it common, and not only is it a part of the human condition, but when we leave it alone, when we don't develop skills, when we don't figure out what to do about it, unfortunately, anxiety is the feeder school into depression. So an untreated anxiety disorder in a child, not normal developmental worries and bumps along the way, but an untreated anxiety disorder is one of the top predictors of developing depression as an adolescent or a young adult. And one of the things that I've seen really in the last few years an increase in is more emails and phone calls from parents saying, you know, my child has always been anxious, but now she's 15 and I'm seeing sort of the depression symptoms step in. Or my child is at college and has always been a perfectionist and a high achiever, but now is really having a hard time sort of getting done what she needs to get done. Or my child graduated from college, he's 22, he's back home now, and all of this work to do everything and get everything done, it's sort of now we can't figure out how to help him move into the next stage. The reason that anxiety turns into depression, well, there's a lot of study that looks at that. There's a lot of research that looks in that. What I see in my practice is that anxiety is about avoidance. Anxiety is about overwhelmed. Anxiety is about no thank you. And what happens when you're little is that if you're anxious, you've got these loving adults that are there to make sure that everything happens for you that needs to happen. So the adults sort of supervise your social life, and you get invited to the parties. And if there's swimming lessons, the parents can go to the swimming lesson with you. And if there's a party and you're nervous about going, it's okay if mom or dad go to the party and hang out with the other parents. What happens when you hit middle school and high school is that it's no longer socially appropriate for we as parents to be that safety crutch. Not only that, but the stakes start to get higher. So now we're evaluating you, we're grading you, we're talking to you about your future. And so if there's a 12-year-old going to a sleepover, it is not cool if mom goes too, right? So the 12-year-old who's nervous about it will say, oh, no thanks. Now, when you're trying out for sports or trying out for play or auditioning for a part in the orchestra, it is no longer inclusive. Now we are going to make cuts. We are going to exclude parents, as we should, from that process. So then you hit high school, and now we've made the stakes even higher. So now we're really going to evaluate you. And we're going to talk about your junior year, right? Remember that junior year. This is your junior year. And we have to do all these things. They're not imagining it. The reason your children are here is because they worked their butts off, because they took the AP classes, because they did all the things that they needed to do, but it wears them out. And so when you hit that period of time that not only are the stakes very high, but now the social stuff is even more complicated. We're adding a whole nother dimension of social connection. And during adolescence, social connection is the developmental mandate of adolescence. And here comes anxiety again to say, no. Because the problem with anxiety is that it wants what it wants. It doesn't like unexpected things. It doesn't like variability. It doesn't like not knowing. Anxiety is all about creating certainty and comfort. And the more that you step into your world, and the more that you are trying to develop independence, and the more that we want you to take reasonable risks, the more the anxiety is there to say, oh, no. We're not going to do this unless we know exactly what's going to happen. And the problem that happens with kids that are showing anxiety and with parents that are showing anxiety, because here's the thing, I hate to break it to you, but it's been about 16 years since an anxious kid came into my office with two really laid-back parents. This thing runs in families. It's just the way it works. And so what happens is that the certainty and the comfort become the priority. And we, as loving adults, are trying to create certainty and comfort, and it gets in the way of developing the skills that young adults need in order to function. And I'm all about developing the skills. So just a little bit more bad news. Several years ago, probably more than a decade ago now, the World Health Organization said, everybody in the world, take note, by 2020, depression will be the leading cause of illness and disability in the world among adults. And everybody said, oh, God, well, that's terrible news. But we thought, well, 2020, that sounds like a long way off, but still, right? But then what they said in 2014 is, oh, remember how we said adults 2020? Well, teenagers, which they defined as kids between the ages of 10 and 19, depression is now the leading cause of illness and disability in adolescence in the world. In 2014. And then in April of 2017, the World Health Organization sent out a strong letter saying that as of 2016, depression is now the leading cause of disability and distress in human beings in the world. That is an 18% increase between 2005 and 2015. The reason I am telling you this is that if you are of the belief that depression and anxiety are purely genetic, that they just show up, that something happens and you have a chemical imbalance and that's what causes these things to just appear, you're not paying attention. Because there is an enormous social component to these maladies. We don't see increases like this if we are looking at it through a purely biomedical lens. What we need to pay attention to is not only the treatment of these things, but the prevention. How can we equip our young people with the skills they need in order to move forward? What can we do? And if we can do it when they're 5, fantastic, but you can do it when they're 18. You can do it when they're 20. You, as parents, have an opportunity, now that your children are in this wonderful place, to begin to promote and support and allow the skills that they need. Now, there are 3 things we know about kids that are raised by worriers. The research is pretty clear about this. One is that they are lousy at tolerating uncertainty. Not surprising, because anxiety is all about demanding certainty. The second is that they're not that great independent problem solvers. And the third is that when we look at the autonomy scales, they tend to score lower than we would like. So if you know that those are the three things, those are the gaps, then that becomes my job as a therapist and as a parent, and your job as parents, as guardians, whatever role it is that you have in a child's life. It is your job to make sure that you are allowing for the development of those skills. How do we allow for the tolerance of uncertainty? How do we be okay with not knowing? How do we let them figure things out without stepping in too quickly? It doesn't mean that we remove our love and our support and our encouragement, but how do we give them space in this place, which is supportive, which is encouraging, which does allow for risk-taking? How do we allow that to happen? And that may be something that you've done all along, but it may be something that now you're needing to recognize the importance of. Despite the fact that it's a tricky time to be in the mental health field, as Rob said, I've been doing this for decades. This is my 29th year being a therapist. It's a tricky time. The numbers are not good. It's a weird time. We are doing things in the mental health field that I actually find pretty abhorrent in the treatment of children and adolescents. Things that I don't understand, things that make no sense to me, having been in this for so long. Despite that, I remain optimistic. I think one of the reasons I like anxiety and treating anxiety is because it's so darn treatable, because we know what works. I like seeing families make progress. And I tend to be just an optimistic person. I'm kind of a, sort of a silver lining person anyway. So it's easy for me to be optimistic by nature. But it's important for all of us to remain optimistic about what's possible for our kids. Now, there was an interesting article, and there's been talk about this, sort of, out there in the universe, about what it is about these kids, these young adults, that do so well, that seem to be able to, make things happen. Here they are at Williams College learning and growing, and they worked hard in high school to get here, and yet they're not feeling what we want them to feel. And one of the things that we're looking at is, what did we as parents do? This article, there's an article actually, you can check it out, Lori Gottlieb wrote it, is that we talk all the time about how we want them to be happy. Your happiness, whatever makes you happy. We want you to be successful and happy. And then when they don't feel happy all the time, they wonder what they're doing wrong. I'm supposed to feel happy. I've achieved this thing. I met my goal. I'm supposed to feel satisfied. And when they don't feel that sense of happiness, they wonder what's wrong. We have almost made the requirement for happy and successful too high, without enough room for them to feel this. And one of the things that's happening is they are questioning their own emotional state when they're having normal fluctuations in mood, or normal levels of stress, or normal disappointment when they don't get what they want, or they screw up. There was a therapist I live in Concord, New Hampshire, and there's a therapist in Concord, New Hampshire, who was going into school meetings and telling the people in the schools that she was diagnosing these high school and middle school students with disappointment syndrome. So that I know that one of the counselors, and she said to me, "Is there such thing as disappointment syndrome?" And I was like, "I don't think so." I went home and Googled it just in case. There isn't anything such as called disappointment syndrome. What it is feeling disappointed. And it's okay to feel that way. So what do we want to teach our kids about being able to manage when things happen? What are the skills? What are the things that they need in order to succeed, however you define that? Now, there are some problems that we have when we're dealing with anxiety and its friend, depression. And that one is that we focus too much on the content over the process. I'm going to talk to you about this so you'll understand. I'm just laying it out for you. The second thing we do wrong is that we are an elimination culture. We like to get rid of things that we don't feel comfortable with, right? We like to get rid of distress, and we like to get rid of gluten, and we like to get rid of all these things, right? We got to get rid of things. We don't like it. And we can take a pill, or we can smoke pot, or all these things we can do to get rid of. Elimination strategies, when it comes to stress and anxiety, elimination strategies backfire big time, and I will tell you why. And then the third thing that we do is that we think too much. And I am not opposed to thinking, obviously, but we are experiential learners. And if you tend to be a thinker, if you tend to be an analyzer, it's the word over that's a problem. Overthinking, overanalyzing, ruminating, the pattern of going over something over and over and over again. So knowing that these are the three things that we really need to pay attention to, let me talk to you a little bit about them. Getting trapped in the content means that you are paying too much attention to what you are worrying about and trying to rearrange out here the content in order to appease the anxiety in here. I think of anxiety as a cult leader, C-U-L-T, and anxiety shows up, it moves into families, it moves into schools, it moves into any sort of system, and the cult leader, as you know if you've been in a cult, says, if you're in a cult now, you don't know you're in a cult, but that's the problem, right? You think we're just really tight-knit. But so if you've been in a cult, you understand that the cult leader shows up and says, if you listen to what I say, if you do things my way, then everything's going to go smoothly. But when you don't listen to the cult leader, then there's a problem. And the reason we negotiate with the cult leader is because we don't want to pay the consequences of pissing off the cult leader. It's too much, and it's going to get in the way, and things are going to get derailed. So we give in to the cult leader. We've got to make sure we've got to rearrange things out here so that the cult leader doesn't get angry. When you are focusing on what you worry about, you are in what I call the content trap. So you're trying to figure out what's the problem out here and how can I rearrange it. A mom came to hear a talk that I gave recently. Oh, it was probably like at the end of the summer. And she emailed me this fall. Her son was going to go to UNH. And she said that she was very tempted to email the housing at UNH and get him in a room with his friend from high school that he got along with. She wanted to make sure that his roommate would be okay. And she resisted. She heard me talk in the spring, and, you know, I basically said, like, get out of there. So she didn't do it. She said that he got put in a quad with 3 guys that he didn't know, so it's the 4 of them. She said the room is so small they can barely turn around, and it's been challenging, but he's handling it. And she wanted me to know that she could have stepped in and rearranged his world in order to make it smooth for him, but he's learning valuable skills, having to get along with 3 other guys in close quarters, making new friendships, figuring out how they're going to coexist. So, a content-based intervention is when we try and rearrange out here. So if you are, and sometimes we can get rid of the content, and that's fine. If you're afraid of roller coasters, don't go on roller coasters. Your life will be full and fine. It's no big deal. But what if you're afraid of making a mistake? What if you're afraid of vomiting? What if you're afraid of getting sick? What if you're afraid of death? What if you're afraid of speaking to people? What if you're afraid of doing something that might hurt somebody's feelings later? And your goal is to rearrange out here. What if you're a little kid and you're afraid of fire drills? And so the school says, he doesn't like fire drills, so what we're going to do is we're going to remove him from fire drills so that he doesn't have to hear the loud noise and be startled, and we'll take him outside and then his class can join him out there. Well, we have just rearranged the content such that the anxiety says, oh my gosh, thank you. You have created certainty and comfort for me. I so appreciate it. That's called doing the disorder. The skill that somebody needs to learn in order to manage a fire drill is how to be startled, not know when it's coming, and then have the wherewithal to pull your prefrontal cortex back online so that you can follow the instructions to safely get out of the building. Why would we want to get rid of that opportunity to develop a very important skill? Because if your house catches on fire, they don't call you the day before and say, hey, I just want to let you know, your house is going to catch on fire tomorrow night. The skill is to be able to handle the unexpected loud and startling noise, rather than to remove that. So, if we are in a process-based intervention, then what we are doing is we are teaching people, young adults, college students, kindergartners, 80-year-olds, I don't care. We are teaching them how to recognize the process of worry. How does worry work? Because it works the same for everybody. Worry shows up and says, some version of what if, or some version of blah, 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 and you can't handle it. The blah, blah, blah is the content. And it pulls you in, and you imagine things. And you get yourself, people say to me, well, if I was this anxious sitting in the gate waiting to get onto the airplane, what's it going to be like when I get on the airplane? If it's this bad when I imagine taking the exam, how am I possibly going to be able to take the exam? The worry happens ahead of time. It's the ruminating. It's the catastrophizing. I was talking to a parent recently, and she came up to me. It was after I did a presentation at a school in Boston. And she said to me, well, my daughter's been diagnosed with anticipatory anxiety. I said, well, that's not really a thing. She said, what? But that's what they told us. She has anticipatory anxiety. I said, well, that's like saying you have the sad kind of depression. Right? It's this is what gets us going. Sometimes anxiety can go backwards, right? Like I worry about something I did. Did I buy the right refrigerator? Right? Did I adopt the right dog? What if I adopted that dog, but the next litter had a better dog for me? Did I say something when I said that? Did that person's expression, should I have said something different? So it can go backwards, but oftentimes it goes forward. A process-based intervention says, I am going to recognize and understand and acknowledge what my worry says when it shows up. I'm going to personify it. I'm going to externalize it. I'm going to observe it. I'm going to give it a name. And I do this with everybody. I don't just do this with 5-year-olds. I have a woman now, she's a 52-year-old world-class worrier from way back. And she has just started a second career as a real estate agent. Do you know how much uncertainty and discomfort there is in the real estate business? Some of you may work in that business. You are dealing with people. What if you make a mistake? What if you say the wrong thing? So, whoom, up comes her worry. And instead of her turning and listening to it and saying, oh my gosh, worry, thank you so much for giving me all those options and those possibilities of things that could go catastrophically wrong, she recognizes it. It shows up and says some version of, you might screw up, Kate. And she goes, oh, hi, thanks for sharing. Being able to recognize the process. The content is what makes everybody think it's different for everybody. It's not. It's the same. The worry shows up, goes after the uncertainty, seeks comfort, and you look to it and you try and figure out how to fix it. And perhaps more importantly, how to make it go away. Nobody comes to see me and says, I would like to develop a different relationship with my worry and my anxiety so when it shows up that I can have a different conversation with it. They don't say that. They show up saying, get rid of it. I don't want to feel this way. When you're in the content trap, you think that giving more information, going over things over and over again, giving external reassurance, you'll be fine, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. What if I throw up? What if I throw up? You're not going to throw up. Look, your color is good. Right? There's no viruses going around. We'll take your temperature. I had a parent that was taking her daughter's temperature every half hour just to reassure her, look, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. The more you externally reassure, the more you are doing the disorder. Think of the anxiety as this entity that has its demands. And when you give into its demands without developing skills to manage and recognize it, you are making the problem worse. Elimination strategies, again, they make sense in the short term. You know, like that, I get all warmed. I start with my sweater on, and then I'm like, all right, now I'm warmed up, I gotta take it off. Elimination strategies are how we get rid of this thing. What can we do? That's where those content-based interventions is. That's where that mom was gonna go. I don't want my child to be uncomfortable in his room. I am going to make sure that he has a roommate that we know, right? We want a sure thing. We're going to get rid of the discomfort. The problem is with anxiety is that the more you try and get rid of worried thoughts, the stronger it gets. That's how our brains work. If I say to you, do not think about right now, and I mean it, don't think for 1 minute right now about a green tiger. There it is. When you say, I can't have this feeling. I can't have this thought. Our brains create weird thoughts all the time. Have you ever been to the Grand Canyon? Right? So those of you who've been to the Grand Canyon, you know that the walls are shockingly low, right? And you can stand there and you have this thought, I could just jump. Remember when you brought that baby home? Anybody standing at the top of the staircase and you think, I could fall right now, holding my baby. It happens. I have a friend who did it. Several actually. Yeah. One, she fell and she threw the baby up in the air and the husband caught the baby. The other fell and she broke the baby's leg. Yeah, he's fine now. He's like 6'10". But we have these thoughts. And if we are trying to get rid of them, we are doing the disorder. And the other thing that happens is that when we are trying to get rid of anxiety, when we're trying to get rid of worry, when we're trying to get rid of feelings, we put in what are called safety behaviors. Safety behaviors are designed to eliminate discomfort and anxiety and worry. So a safety behavior, distraction is a big safety behavior. There are some people who work with anxiety who say that distraction is a fine strategy to use. There are others of us who think that that's a problem. The research backs up my perspective, actually. That when we teach distraction strategies to people who have panic attacks, they get worse. Because it's how do I get rid of it? This is about allowing, not eliminating. This is about normalizing, not pathologizing. Now, if you aren't really a worrier and you're thinking about something at work and you think, oh my gosh, I do not want to think about this anymore. I'm just going to watch the Great British Baking Show on Netflix, right? That's fine. But if you are a chronic worrier and you think, I have to get rid of it, that creates a problem. Was talking to a girl, she came to me for a consult. She was a field hockey player, and she was a high school field hockey player, and a really good high school field hockey player, like being scouted, maybe going to go play Division I field hockey. And she was a worrier, and she was a perfectionist. And so when she was playing field hockey, her worry would show up, and it would say, what if you make a mistake? And she also didn't like that her coach yelled at her, and she had a yeller of a coach. It was a new coach. Coach was a yeller. What if you make a mistake? What if you make a mistake? So she's out on the field trying to play field hockey, and here comes her worry. What if you make a mistake? What if you make a mistake? Right? The coach will yell at you. The coach will yell at you. And then she would say, I don't feel good, and she'd get pulled off the field, and then the coach would say, you're not playing. Oh, I know, I'm sick to my stomach. And the whole cycle would just go. So she was seeing a therapist, and the therapist said to her, when you start to worry on the field hockey field, just sing your favorite song in your head to distract you from your worry. And I don't know if I said it in my inside voice or my outside voice, because it can go either way, but my thought was that's stupid. Because what she was doing then was now distracting herself with something else on the field hockey field that was going to have her make more mistakes and have the coach yell at her more. Singing while you're playing field hockey because you're worried about making a mistake is not a good strategy. What's the skill that I want her to develop? The ability to tolerate screwing up. Nobody plays field hockey perfectly. Nobody plays any sport perfectly. Ian Kinsler, I know. Thanks, I know. I feel your pain. I just found out this morning. Some of you are like, what are you talking about? It's a Red Sox game, people. Come on. It's a World Series. So what I said to her was, it is your ability to tolerate making mistakes and to have a different response, not only when you make a mistake, but when your coach yells at you. Now, we're not going to talk her out of it. I don't want her to say, yay, I made a mistake, woo! But the ability to know that that happens. So when that mistake happens, or when her worry shows up and says, what if you make a mistake? She says, hi, worry. Let's say she names her worry Sylvia. Hi, Sylvia, nice to see you. Of course, you show up at field hockey games. How do we allow there to be a relationship between the worry rather than trying to get rid of it all the time? You all know if you are a functional human being, If you are living your life and getting your job done, whatever that job is, you know what your worry says to you. And in any given moment, you can either turn to the worry and say, oh my gosh, tell me more, that's so interesting. Or, oh, that's breaking news, I've never heard that before. Or you say, this is what my brain does when I'm stressed. Or this is what my worry does because it's a habit. Girl that I see now, she's a junior, smart. She's going to do good things. And her worry shows up and says, nobody likes you. Really? Well, there is plenty of evidence to the contrary. And I could get in a discussion with her. Her mother has gotten in plenty of discussions with her about how likable she is, about how many friends she has, about how when she plays the clarinet, the band leader only has wonderful things to say about her. She is truly a lovely human being. And to know her is to like her. And yet her worry shows up and says, nobody likes you, and she believes it. Now, I could spend a lot of time trying to talk her out of that. There is plenty of evidence to the contrary. But what I need to do is have her diminish the power of this thought habit. It's not true. I wish she would believe it. I wish I could say, don't think that. That's thought stopping. Don't think that. But the goal is to allow that thought to show up and have her observe it and respond differently to it. I don't want it to be a surprise, and I don't want it to have so much authority. So she's going to name her worry something. She's going to personify it something. I say to teenagers and young adults all the time, is there anybody in your life that when they talk to you, you're like, oh my God, please, right? Name your worry after that guy. Name your worry after the person that you're like, ugh, that you give an internal eye roll to. You don't have to believe everything you think. Oh, let me say something about this because you guys are looking at that. You're like, oh my gosh, calming and breathing exercises? I thought those are helpful. Is she going to take that away too? Right? I thought that was good. I don't use the word calm very often in my work with anxious people. I don't talk about being calm. I don't tell people to calm down. I tell people to recognize and regroup. I talk about resetting and rebooting. Breathing exercises are very helpful to reboot and reset. But what they don't do, here's the only problem I have with teaching breathing exercises, is that a lot of kids, a lot of high schools, a lot of college programs, a lot of elementary schools are very focused on breathing exercises in order to manage your worry, and they are teaching nothing else. Breathing is a skill that's helpful to have. It's more of a technique, but I want a strategy. So if you are going to do breathing exercises, that's a way to get your prefrontal cortex back online. That's a way to pull you back to where you need to be so you can problem solve. We've all had that moment, right? Oh my God, I want to throw my laptop through the window. Okay, just take a few deep breaths. Before you say what you're going to say, take a few deep breaths. It's a reboot. But if you have a kid who's worrying, if you have a kid who's a perfectionist, if you have a kid who worries all the time, what if, and the only thing you teach him is how to breathe, it's not going to do it. I guarantee I see it all the time. Breathing does not change your relationship to your worry. It does not increase your ability to problem solve. It may increase your ability to get this part of your brain up so that you can problem solve, but it doesn't teach you the skill of being able to step back. It doesn't increase your autonomy. Those are the skills that we have to build. So breathing is a good way to reboot, but it's not enough. So that's the only problem I have with the way that we're teaching breathing to kids. I was talking to a young man who's ready to go off to college. He was a senior in high school. And he came and heard a talk that I did, and he said, well, I appreciate what you're saying, Lynn, but it's not going to work on me. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I've been in therapy for 4 years for my social anxiety, and it's not gotten any better. And so I'm one of those people who, can't be helped. And I said, oh my gosh, you're 18 years old, and that's the conclusion that you've come to? And he said, well, 4 years, nothing's worked. I said, well, what have you learned? And he said, coping strategies. And I said, like what? And he said, well, I've learned it's really important for me to get enough sleep. I go, yep, that is very true. Sleep is good. Sleep deprivation, bad. When you don't have enough sleep, everything is worse, including your ability to cognitively function. What else? He said, I've learned that exercise helps. Yes, also very good, right? Study after study, right? Studies from the University of that exercise helps human beings. We hear it all the time. Another one just came out recently where they find that people who exercise, it's actually preventative when we're looking at the development of depression. Okay, great. What else did you learn? I learned breathing. I said, also a very good skill for a human being to have. So in 4 years, you covered 3 very important things. Breathing is good, sleep is good, as exercise is good. What do you know about social anxiety? Who taught you the skills you need in order to step in to situations where you don't feel comfortable? And he looked at me. What do you mean? What is the skill that somebody who has social anxiety needs to learn? We don't know what other people think. Stepping into social situations is enormously risky. It could be a little risk. Somebody judges you. Somebody doesn't like what you're wearing. And it could be a big risk. Somebody fires you from the job or doesn't hire you from your dream job. Social interactions carry an enormous amount of uncertainty and discomfort when you are stepping into new situations. That's what somebody with social anxiety needs to learn. Not only do they need to learn that, but they need to understand and accept that human beings are incredibly judgy. We are a social species. We judge each other all the time because we're trying to figure out, are you friend or foe? Am I going to have sex with you? Are we going to mate or not mate? That's what it comes down to. That's how it's been for millions of years. We're trying to figure out. We're dependent upon each other for our survival. So we read each other. We try and figure each other out. You can't help somebody with their social anxiety unless you talk to them very directly about the ability to not know what other people are thinking, because we lie all the time. We do. You go over to your friend's house. She's a terrible cook. She makes you dinner. You go, oh my gosh, Linda, thank you. That was so great. And then you leave and you go, oh God, Linda cannot cook to save her life. Right? Or you see somebody that you don't really care for. Oh, how are you? It's so nice to see you. And you leave. Oh my God, she does not stop talking. We do it all the time. Nobody had taught him that. In 4 years of therapy for social anxiety, nobody had taught him to recognize the patterns of how social anxiety works. That's what we need to do. That's the skill. So these are just pictures of safety behaviors. The reason there's a water bottle up there is because we now walk around with water bottles all the time. And again, I feel like water and breathing are very, very important to human being survival. But what I've noticed in the last several years, families will come in to see me and everybody has their water bottle, right? It's a 60-minute session. It's an environmentally controlled environment, right? And the mom's like, make sure you drink, Joshua, hydrate. You have soccer practice after this. Hydrate. We have raised a generation of kids who feel like they are on the verge of dehydration at any moment. Haven't we? Yeah. Oh, I have to have this. Over-the-counter medications. I have to take this. And prescription medications. I need this. Cell phones, little certainty devices, right? I can know. If you are, okay, let me just tell you this. I really mean it. If your child is a student at Williams, which is why I assume you're here, and you are tracking them on your cell phone, I implore you, do not leave campus today without deleting that app. I'm serious. It is incredibly, incredibly intrusive, and it is the opposite of what you are trying to teach your child. You do not need to know where they are every minute. That's weird. That's weird. A mom said to me, well, I just want to know. It just makes me feel better. I think he was like at WPI or something like that. I just want to know that at night his head is on the pillow in his dorm. And I said, do you want to know if there are 2 heads on the pillow? And she said, ew, that's gross. I said, exactly my point. Remember, you guys are probably similar to my age if you've got college-age kids, right? Remember when phones were attached to the wall? Right? And you'd be talking to your friend, right? So you're talking to Amy, you're talking about something, right? And you hear a little click. And you're like, Amy, don't say anything. Yeah, I know, my mom just picked up. She's trying to listen. I know, it's so creepy. I know, hold on, I gotta yell at her. And you'd be like, Mom, get off the phone! Is she still there? I know, it's so weird. Right? Tracking your child on a cell phone is not a good idea. And it's hard to stop. It is so seductive. It is so addictive. Oh, I get to know. I had a parent who said that she knew her child's schedule. And on 3 days of the week, she had 8 o'clock classes, and she just didn't trust that her college freshman would get up for those classes. And so she would track her on the cell phone. And at 7:45, if she could still see she was in her dorm room, she would call her and say, are you up? You've got an 8 o'clock class. Inability to tolerate uncertainty, lousy at independent problem solving, lack of autonomy. This is what I'm talking about. Will it make you feel uncomfortable? Yes. I have a son in North Carolina. Do you remember there was a hurricane in the fall? Remember that? So I send him off, and he's in North Carolina, and we're watching and watching and watching, and he's not in the target zone. They are actually evacuating kids from Wilmington to his campus. And so he sends me a text, just as, you're watching the news, and they're like, the eye of the storm, landfall, blah, like the Weather Channel, they're all going nuts, right? And he sends me a text, and it says, guess what they just announced? And I text back, they're evacuating you? They're sending you home? And he says, no, they just released the new iPhone. This is the shift that we're looking for. This is what we're going for. The ability to feel uncomfortable if you are stepping into something. If you feel uncomfortable, you're on the right track. I was meeting with a bunch of people yesterday, and there was a lot of the deans and such. And there was a woman who does a lot of Division III stuff in physics and that kind of stuff. And she says the language she uses is that she wants her students to embrace a productive struggle. A productive struggle. This is what they're here for. The overthinking, the overanalyzing. Not that I don't value thinking, but as I said, it's the over. Right? I planned to be here. You planned to be here. We planned. We prepared. We thought about it. But the over-planning, the planning, the overthinking, that's when it becomes a problem. Kate Stroud is actually a psychology professor here. And she has done some great work. So I got the Alumni magazine in 2017. I think it was the summer of 2017, and there was an interview with her about her research with adolescent girls and depression. And in the thing it said, well, what surprised you the most about your findings? And what she said, what surprised me the most was the impact that parents can have on the development of depression, right? And I said to myself, that doesn't surprise me at all. But I'm a clinician, and she's getting the research. And what she found in her research is that when a teenage girl, an adolescent girl, was having difficulty with something, they were less likely to get depressed if that mother supported problem solving and seeking out social support. And they were more likely to be depressed if that mother supported distraction and avoidance. Because distraction and avoidance led to more ruminating. Trying to get rid of it, trying to get rid of it. The more you try and get rid of it, the more it's there. That's just the way our brains work. So one of the things that we know with anxiety, and Kate Stroud talks about this too, are something called negative anxiety response styles. This is when we overreact. So when you have anxiety, instead of saying, this is a part of being a human being, this is because I'm stepping into something new, of course, I couldn't do my job if I couldn't say the two words, of course you're feeling this way, of course it feels weird, of course it feels challenging, of course, new stage, new environment. If you over-respond to symptoms, then that creates much higher levels of difficulty. Step one, we're going to have thoughts and feelings and sensations. Step two, how do we respond to them? You all know this. There's a big difference between the people who are caught in traffic, who are going to be late for an important meeting, who are like, all right, you know what, nothing I can do, this happens, versus the people that get out of their car with a baseball bat and start slamming people's windshields. We all have thoughts and feelings and sensations. It's called emotional management. How do we handle it? How do we talk to ourselves about it? How do we seek out the support that we need? Sometimes the skill you need to develop is the ability to know when you can handle something yourself and when you need to ask for help. These are some other, and I'm happy to email these to you if you want, but these are just some, I just wanted to give you the research that she's doing, seeing as she's right here. So ruminating, as I said, is the process of going over things. The problem with ruminating is that it feels like problem solving. It disguises itself as problem solving. Going over something over and over and over again is one of the big risk factors for being depressed. So Susan Nolan Hoeksma was a researcher. She was at the University of Michigan? Yale. Yeah, so she died a few years ago. She got a weird infection and died young, unfortunately. She wrote a great book called Women Who Think Too Much. And she looked at the pattern of rumination. Rumination follows the anxiety thing, the anxiety path, because it is seeking certainty. I need to think about this, think about this, think about this. When you ruminate, you generally ruminate about negative things. I was at a wedding once. There are two places you don't want to tell people that you specialize in anxiety, just by the way. On an airplane and at a wedding. I was at a wedding, and I was sitting down next to this person who I didn't really know, and she was talking to me about her divorce and the vitriol that she was telling me about how her ex-husband had done her wrong, and he had done this and this and this and that. I mean, she was just, rah. So I sat and listened patiently, and on the inside, I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But I sat and listened patiently. And finally, I said to her, this sounds so hard for you. When did all of this happen? 17 years ago. She had been ruminating for 17 years. So seeking certainty, being able to tell the difference between I need certainty, decision making, versus problem solving is a hugely important skill to have. Behavioral activation is just a fancy term for a type of therapy that we do for depression, where we do stuff. So if you see me for therapy, you have assignments between every session. It really doesn't make any sense to me that you would just come in and talk about what you're anxious about. That's doing the disorder. Do you know what loves to talk about what it's anxious about? The anxiety. Behavioral activation means that we do things in order to get a positive feedback loop, that we step in. We are experiential learners. And so the assignment might be that you're going to do something on purpose that is going to bring your worry up so that you can observe it and practice responding differently. I had a young man come to see me. He hadn't been to school in 8 months, had barely left his room in 8 months. So socially anxious, so worried that he was going to say something wrong. So we got to know each other, and I started giving him assignments right away from the first session. And one of the things he had to do is he had to walk into the bagel store in Concord and order a pepperoni pizza. Because he was going to walk in and say, I would like a pepperoni pizza. And the 19-year-old behind the counter was going to be like, dude, bagels. Right? Purposely embarrass himself. He started playing the guitar, and then I started asking him, can you come up with things that we know will generate worry for you so that you can tolerate it? So he started playing the guitar, and a great gift from the universe, his guitar teacher was this really sweet guy, a young dad of a bunch of little kids who had also really been anxious as a young man, so he totally got it. And when the weather got nice, they started having their guitar lessons sitting out on the stone wall, which is on Main Street in Concord, so that while they were practicing, people were walking by. He joined a band. He got a girlfriend. He's a sophomore in college. We needed to teach him how to tolerate not knowing exactly what was going to happen, and then to problem solve. His dad is the anxious one, so he was going to have a little gig with his band. And his dad said to him, and he was playing the electric guitar, and his dad said to him in the catastrophic way that his dad often did, what if you drop your pick during the middle of the performance? So at first he was like, right? So anxiety would be like, oh, we're out, right? That could happen. But he said, no, I'm not. There's my worry. Worry saying, oh, that would be a disaster. He says, I'm going to problem solve. So he went online and he Googled something, I don't know what he put in exactly, but how do you secure your pick? And he found that Eric Clapton had this thing where he would tape a bunch of extra picks to his guitar because his hands would get sweaty. He would drop it, and then he'd just pull out another one. So that's what he did. Problem solving, versus shutting down and backing out. I don't spend a lot of time talking about why. Why somebody is anxious is generally pretty apparent to me. This is a generational thing. We know there's a genetic push to some anxiety disorders, particularly to temperament. Temperament is genetically mediated, and certain temperaments put you more at risk for developing anxiety. There's a temperament called behavioral inhibition, which in the old days we would just say, like, you're super shy. But you get overwhelmed easily. A behaviorally inhibited baby. I was at a workshop, and there was a mom standing there with a little, like, 7-month-old in a little front-facing carrier, you know, baby Bjorn thing. And I went up and I said, "Hi, baby." And that baby was like, "Ah!" like we had not seen each other for years. I could have taken that baby with me, and that little baby would have been like, "Great." And then there was another little baby, similar age, and I went up to that baby and I said, "Hey, baby." And that baby was like, "Roar," right? Different temperaments of babies. So we know that it runs in families. We know there's a genetic push. We also know, and there's some really interesting studies where they look at the children of twins who are anxious, and they really don't find the genetic thing that everybody thinks is the driving force. What they do find is modeling, which makes sense. We're social creatures. The reason your children speak the language you speak is because you taught them to speak that language. The reason that they eat with a spoon is because you showed them to eat with a spoon. The reason they love the Red Sox is because you love the Red Sox. Or maybe they hate the Red Sox because you love the Red Sox, but that's a whole other family issue. So when we're talking about how and why in anxious families, here it is. Something happened, because we know that trauma can cause anxiety. So something happened, and or it runs in the family. With the people that I treat, they prefer, if it's explanation 2, and I can figure that out pretty quickly, if it's explanation 2, they prefer explanation 1. They've got to find what happened. Right? So they go on a quest, and they'll say to me, everything was fine until. It was that thing that happened. But if I look at the history, no, this has been going on for a long time. When I ask kids in my office, which of your parents is the worrier? Very, very rarely do they go, "Oh my gosh, Lynn, that is a tough question." Right? They're like, yeah. And then when I say to that parent, "Who taught you how to worry?" the kid goes, "Oh my gosh, grandma's out of control." Right? Or my pop-pop has all these weird rules we have to follow when we go to his house. So when we get out of the why, and we just accept, why in an anxious family, why does the child worry a lot? Why the anxious? Because we're social creatures. Because it goes on, right? Our job as parents is to interrupt the cycle. That's always our job. Both of my grandfathers were alcoholics. My mother's name is Kathleen Marie Murphy. My dad comes from repressed German stock. They were very clear about the fact. Their fathers were alcoholics in very different ways, but it left a mark on them. And they didn't drink. And they told us very clearly, we don't drink because. And with my 2 boys, we're very clear with them. So I come from, Kathleen Marie Murphy, and then my husband's side of the family, like, oh my God, right? We're very clear. And our kids have a very open and very direct view of what substances do to families. Our job is to break the cycle. So if you're a worrier, ask your kids. They'll tell you. Name your worry. Tell them. Say to your kids, "My worry is named Gladys, and when you see my worry show up, call me on it." When you're emailing, when you're tracking, which you're going to stop today, let your kids know that you're working on changing that pattern. It's the how, not the why. Why are you worried? Then we ask these why questions. Why are you worried about that? When I used to do couples therapy, which I don't really do very often, the rule was you cannot ask your partner a why question in which the implied answer is because I'm a dumbass, right? Like, why can't you remember? Why can't you get along with my sister? Why can't you, right? What do they say? Why are you worried about that? What are they going to say? How? How can you figure this out? How can I support you so that you can manage this on your own? How can I give you what you need in order for you to figure this out? How can I help you develop your sense of autonomy? Self-esteem comes from doing stuff. It doesn't come from you telling them how awesome they are without giving them the opportunity to back it up for themselves. And they are awesome. But let them figure out that they're not awesome all the time, every minute, and that that's okay. Believing your own thinking is a pretty tricky way to go through life, because there's a lot of random stuff that happens up here. The ability to be flexible in your perceptions, the ability to question your own beliefs, the ability to tolerate new stuff coming in. Isn't that what we want for our kids? Rather than to have them rigidly believe their own thinking wherever it happened to have come from. Being flexible in your thinking. So these are the questions that I ask. This is how I want young people to be able to step back and look at their own patterns. What's the new chapter that they've stepped into in their lives as college students? What's different about this environment? Maybe this place is completely different from whence they came. Maybe it's more similar. But how do we get them to look at who they are and to understand their own thinking? Michael Yapko is my mentor. He's a depression expert, one of the leading depression experts in the world. And he said to me a while ago, I was talking to him about something, and he said, Lynn, the skill of all skills is the ability to step back from your own thinking long enough to evaluate it. How do you do that? How do you take the time? How do you notice your pattern? That's mindfulness, people. Right? We love mindfulness. Step back and observe. Mindfulness, by the way, if you talk to the people who really do mindfulness, it's not about being calm. It's not about being relaxed. Ron Siegel, who's a mindfulness and anxiety guy, a colleague of mine out of Boston, he says the reason you learn mindfulness is not to keep calm, it's so that you can take it with you into the fire. The ability to manage as you move forward. None of this that I am talking about is possible without connection. Human beings need connection. They need connection from you. They need you to know that you love them and support them, but they need you to be able to tolerate their distress. They need you to be able to allow them to do things and make mistakes. One of the things I always say to parents is that our goal is not to make sure that they make all the right decisions, it's to give them the skills to recover from the inevitable poor ones. What do we want our kids to know as they're learning and growing and becoming functional adults so they can leave this wonderful place and take a whole new set of skills into the world? The article by Jean Twenge, if any of you saw it, it was in the Atlantic when was it? Yeah, almost about a year ago now, actually. It's about smartphones. Because now they're beginning to have data enough because there's a generation of kids that have had smartphones from an early age. They've lived with them. Even my 20-year-old sort of missed this by a few years. And she has some pretty strong language in this about screen time. But what I took from that article, that it's more about the isolation. That it's more about not being connected out here, but instead being connected to here. How do we promote face-to-face connection? An internal focus. And anxiety and depression are referred to as internalizing disorders. An internal focus is a risk factor for anxiety and depression. An external focus is preventative. How do we help them connect? How do we help them be involved? You know, when I hear about them talking about tutorials, as I said, my son is a physics major and he's doing a physics tutorial now. And it's sitting with a few people face to face and talking about things and discussing things and learning things. This is a wonderful place for that to happen. We just need to make sure that we're allowing it to happen, and we need to make sure that there is room for it to happen. I will tell you a little secret. When I came to Williams, I was a freshman, and I thought I wanted to be a therapist, but I wasn't sure, and I was an English major, and I decided to take Psych 101 as a freshman. It was the lowest grade that I had ever received in my academic career, because my roommates, Kitty and Kate, told me that you don't have to go to a big lecture class. And I was a goody two-shoes. This was news to me. I'd never skipped a class in my life. Woohoo! I'm at Williams and I don't have to go to class. Awesome. Didn't work out so well. But it was okay. I learned my lesson. I learned a few lessons. One, go to class and don't listen to Kitty and Kate. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your weekend with your child to be here. I appreciate you listening. I'll stick around a little bit if you have any questions. If you go on my website, there's plenty of resources there geared toward anxious kids and anxious teens, stuff on depression, stuff for parenting. I know that this is a hard job. I'm right in it with you. My son's freshman year here wasn't so easy. He was sad, he was lonely, he was in love and missing his girl. We had to hang in there, so hang in there. Support them and love them, but think about the skills that they need and get off the tracking apps now. All right, thank you so much.